Lloyd, thanks for coming over. Today I'm going to talk to you about my experience at a private college and a public university. I went to a private school for 3 years and a public university for 2. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, differences, and what I liked best about each one, what I didn't like, and why I transferred schools. Okay, so first of all, I went to private school, co-college for 3 years in Iowa, and then I went to Iowa State University for the last 2. When I was applying for colleges, you wouldn't think this by looking at my room, but I can be very organized. I had a spreadsheet of like 17 colleges I applied to with different categories, and none of them were in Iowa. I wanted out of here. A lot of them were in the South. I was tired of winter. But after visiting some schools and thinking about it, I decided being closer to home would work better for me. So, the first thing that is obviously different is the size of the school. The private college I went to had 1,800 students, and the public university had like 40,000 students. So I personally preferred the smaller class sizes in campus of the private school. It was like a 10-minute walk end to end of campus. Time and I do not get along very well. I'm always running late, so I would be able to like leave for class like 3 minutes before it would start, and I would be on time. Just run right across the like quad, and so I liked that. I'm sure there are some private schools that are like bigger with their campus and bigger with their class sizes, but I really liked that my school, like I said, had 1,800 students. It was required for you to live on campus. You couldn't live off campus. So it was really easy to be able to get to everything. There wasn't need for like a bus system or anything. Like the grocery store was like 2 blocks away. It felt really safe, really enclosed. Like you could always see security around. And like I said, if you're someone who runs late, that's nice. That's such a small campus to get to places. It's also nice in the winter to be able to just like run from your dorm to the library or cafeteria and be there within a few minutes, which is nice. Whereas at the public college I went to, my nearest class this past year was a 10-minute walk from my apartment, and that was quicker than the bus because the bus system was super messed up this year. Road work, I don't know. But so I really liked having small campus size, especially since, I don't know, I would end up walking 2 to 5 miles a day at Iowa State, which like is good for your health, but I don't always really like that, especially in the winter. When I started my first day at public university, I overslept. Again, something I don't know. I don't hear alarms a lot of the time. It's bad. But I overslept, and I was the class was almost over, and it was my first day of school, and I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I made a bad impression on the professor. This is just not good. And then I was freaking out, and then like I looked at the class to like email, and the class had like over 300 students in it. So that's the difference. At a private school, the class is much smaller. Most classes I had, the major I had there, I did writing. It was my first degree with Spanish minor, and that's not the school had a lot of science students and like pre-med and nursing students, and so like classes could range generally between 15 to like 5, and I really liked that. So that's another point, is that if you like more discussion-based learning, which I do, I want to learn, I need to like participate. So that's what I liked about the private school, was that I was always engaged and always had to be productive in the class. The largest class I had there for gen ed, I took biology, and I think that was 40 students. Some of the science, like introductory courses like biology and stuff, seminars, could have like a much bigger class, but I mean by that I mean 100, not like 350 students. So I preferred the class sizes at the private school, and at the public school, again, at some there were like over 100, but then I did have smaller classes. The smallest class I had was probably a dozen, and it could still be discussion-based learning, so that was nice. I just feel like I don't learn well having someone talk at me. It doesn't make sense to me. I could just completely zone out. So that's one thing I don't like about public university. So again, going along with the class size is that you get more one-on-one like relationship with your professors, and obviously professors at a public university care about their students, but it's much easier to form relationships with professors at a private college, like with your advisor. For instance, at Iowa State, you get with the public relations program, it's part of something called the Greenlee School, which is public relations, journalism, and advertising. You get a kind of starter advisor that advises like over 100 students, and that's not very personalized. You have to book, an appointment 2 weeks in advance, whereas at I could email my professor, my advisor, or a professor at 10 a.m. and they'd see me at 1. And so that was nice. They had more time to invest in their advisees. Not that I'm sure that my advisor at the public university was great too. It was just they were busy and it was hard to sometimes get appointments scheduled and things. But I understand because they had so many advisees. But so I really liked that. And it's not necessarily that, like I said, at Iowa State there were some classes where I had less students. Just because there's more students doesn't necessarily mean you can't have the relationship with the professors. A professor that I had for an English class really selected me to be a research assistant with her for a year. So you still can stand out to your professors and make yourself be seen more, but it's kind of harder than it is at a private college. I just realized how crooked my camera is standing, but already halfway through this, so. So, not necessarily the case, but if you plan on switching majors, private schools might not always be super great, you're not completely sure, because, like I said, you might go in there for one thing, and then that's a really great program at the school, and then you want to do something else that perhaps isn't offered due to the size of the school, or the program isn't very well established yet. So that is something to take into consideration. Another thing is the social activities or clubs or academic clubs. Both schools had a great variety. What I liked about the private school was that it was much easier to be involved in it, involved in theater and choir and volunteering in church groups and things, because they were small groups, and personally I like that, and I prefer working with a small group of people, and it's kind of you can be in what you want to be. The campus was just connecting everybody. Regardless of major, you could be in different activities, whereas at the public university, I was not going to. It would be very unlikely for me to get into a show at a play or a musical at Iowa State, and choir was also more competitive and stuff, and so I didn't pursue that once I transferred there. But they did have more clubs, especially academic ones, that I could connect with, that could help me network and help me in the future, such as I was a member of the Association for Women in Mass Communications. I think it's just communications. I should know. I was in it for years. It's just communications. And that club was fairly small too still, so I could be in a leadership position, even though I just was in it for a year. I got a leadership position, but it's harder to get into leadership positions at a big university because there's so many people. Sorority wise, I was in a sorority at Co, and it was pretty small. But it was again easy to get leadership positions, which helps look good on your resume and shows you have some experience. But again, there are more resources available at many public universities. Considering mental health, for example, they could send you to the hospital, which is literally right across the street. It partnered with the school, and you could go in there for some free counseling sessions, but not very many. And there was the chaplain you could talk to, but that was about it. But whereas Iowa State, you could go, they had a whole building dedicated to it. They had group therapy, they had workshops, they had all these things that are very beneficial to students. Accessibility wise too, I have some stuff that I have academic accommodations for physically, but nothing serious where I'd need to have an elevator everywhere and everything. And it might just be, it could just be but Iowa State was much more accessible for students. Like, it was good for Co that it was short walks and everything, but I remember they had literally outside one of the administration buildings, it said like handicap accessible, and it was like over a staircase to go inside the building. There wasn't like a wheelchair ramp, so there might be some issues with that. You just really need to look into the department for that before you just consider. They did do something really great, which was nice, that they had a separate orientation for students with mental or physical health issues that so you wouldn't be overwhelmed, that I went to before freshman orientation, so that was nice. It is, again, kind of more hands-on. They can really focus on you. I was always being reached out to by, you know, the person who ran the accessibility department, which was nice. Okay, so my cat just got out, and I had to sprint after him because he gets in fights with the neighbor's cat. He crawled under a shed. I had to poke him with a stick. I had to entice him out with treats. Why do people think running is fun? That was not fun. Okay, sorry. But I got him, and he's back, and he's a little asshole, but it's okay. It's okay. So the next thing that is different about when I was at a public college versus a private college versus a public university is the traditions. Both schools have them, but I don't know. I have some social anxiety, and also it's easier to participate at a smaller school. Like, Co had 2 dances every year. They had flunk day in the spring, which it was a random day in spring. Nobody knew when it would happen. Wake you up, banging pots and pans at 5 in the morning. There's a barbecue and carnival by the school, and then also, I mean, unofficially, but kind of officially, a way to get drunk. And just day drink all day without classes in the middle of spring. It was great. And Iowa State, it would just be kind of overwhelming, you know, a lot of drunk people. And I mean, if you're short and you're in a crowd of a bunch of drunk people, not very fun. The difference between public and private college is the cost, but it may look like a huge price difference when you first look, but it really isn't that much different when you consider in scholarships and everything. So co-college costs a little over $45,000 a year, which is a lot. But private schools often give out more scholarships. Like, everyone there is guaranteed a scholarship because no one would go there if they had to pay $45,000 a year. So it says online that the average amount a student ends up having to pay with loans is $20,000 a year, whereas Iowa State, which costs about $20,000 a year, you end up paying around $15,000 or $16,000, they say, on average, because they don't give out as many scholarships, and that's for in-state. It's like $20,000 with room and board and tuition. And same thing with Co. That was room and board, tuition, meals. And they don't give out as many scholarships, so you're likely to be just taking out a lot of straight up loans. I had a few grants with Co. And scholarships that depend on your GPA and your ACT score, which I don't get what ACT scores put in there. I never had to take trigonometry. Why is that in there? That's not a required course for anybody, not that I know of. But and also with private schools, they have more money for work study. It's easier to get a work study. I had a work study at Co, but I wasn't eligible for one at Iowa State, so that's beneficial. That's also a way to take off some tuition that is not included in their estimate of paying $20,000 at Co. That can go towards your tuition as well, or it can be cash. And so and also with sorority, for instance, my sorority to Rush, it was like $25, $50, and then my dues were not very much, nor was the initial joining cost, because at Co, one fraternity has a frat house, but everyone else has wings in either the female or the male dormitories. And then in the wing, you have a whole section that's just your sorority, and then you have a chapter room. So that was much cheaper. I don't know if I would have done it if I had started off at a public university like my cousin did, and they have to pay, they have to live in the house for a year at least, and they have to pay. It's expensive because they're paying for a private chef and everything, and also the dues are just like a couple or like thousands of dollars, which that just seems like a lot. So that's something else to consider. Next, why I transferred is because when I started at Co, I started with a creative writing degree and then with a Spanish minor, and then I realized that's not super specific creative writing, so I switched it to a writing degree, and with a Spanish minor, and I did that for a while, and then they started introducing a public relations major there, and I took journalism class, hated it, so I was kind of leery of public relations, but I took the intro course for that, and I thought, you know, I kind of like this. It's practical with my writing degree, and I get to be creative and things like that, so I really enjoyed that. But the problem was it's such a new major at the school that they didn't have a lot of courses for it or resources, whereas Iowa State has a very established advertising, journalism, and public relations department that's known, really well known, and they had more connections, they had more resources, they had more course variety. And so that's really why I transferred to a public university, because they have more resources, and the major just was better for me at that school, and that's going to be my primary major. One thing to know about transferring schools is it is a pain in the butt. The school may say like, oh, it's super easy to transfer to us, we accept everything. Lies. They don't. It can be quite difficult, and there's just so much thrown at you, all this like jargon and like all this paperwork and stuff, that it's kind of like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll trust you guys, and then it can be very overwhelming, and you don't realize what's going to transfer and what won't, because some schools make it very difficult to leave them to transfer to a new school, because they don't want you to leave, obviously. So, when I got to Iowa State, I didn't realize that I took a course at Anthropology of Food. They don't offer that type of anthropology at Iowa State, so I had to take a different anthropology course for gen ed. And at for example, you could either take 2 sciences, including 1 lab science, or you could take a lab science and a math. And I did the 2 sciences thing, but then I had to go and take a math class for my major. Statistics was like required for public relations, which I can kind of see why, but also I don't recall a thing about it. Math and me don't mix, no. So, and they say statistics isn't math, that's what I was told so many times. It's math. So that can be difficult, and also the requirements. Even though I was going in there with 3 years of school under my belt, I had to pass as I had a good ACT score for English, I was able to test out of their English 1, which is required for every student, and then I had to take a 2-hour-long test where I ended up writing like a 2,000 word essay, maybe it was a 3-hour test, to get out of the second English course. And then I had to take, an introductory library course, which everyone has to take, and then introductory courses for public relations and journalism and everything, which I had to take classes for journalism, which I'm like, I don't like journalism, or make me take classes involving journalism. I know I'm public relations. And also, one thing I didn't realize until it was too late is that at I had a writing degree with a Spanish minor and a public relations major as well. And at Iowa State, they don't have a writing major, so I just switched to an English major, which then required a lot more classes, and that was kind of why I had to do a 5th year of school as well as doing public relations. I had to do 5th year to get that sorted out, and then because of COVID, I couldn't do a fun 400-hour internship. I'm still looking for an internship because public relations jobs don't really hire without previous internship experience. It's great. It's great. Yay, COVID. So my advice to you when deciding whether to transfer schools or when deciding on what school to go to is to do your research. And even if you do your research, it doesn't mean you're going to find your perfect fit. Like I said, I went crazy trying to find, sometimes if I get on a task, I get really worried about making it perfect, and even if you're perfectionistic about it, you can't control everything. You can't predict how you're going to like a school or how it's going to work out. So kind of just go with your gut. I toured College on a whim, and I ended up applying and liking it. Sometimes it's just like, you get a feeling, and I really did like it was just better for me professionally, academically, to transfer to Iowa State. I'll leave some resources below that are helpful to me for when deciding colleges. Well, thank you for coming over, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.